It's the year 1287, deep in the wind-swept plains of Manchuria. A rebel Mongol prince named Nayan has raised an army against the mighty Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis and ruler of the vast Yuan Empire. Thousands of horsemen clash in the old style, bows twanging, swords flashing, war cries echoing across the steppe. Then, from the Yuan lines, something new erupts. A squad of soldiers levels short, thick bronze tubes mounted on wooden stocks. They touch flaming wicks to holes at the rear. Thunder cracks the air. Flames and smoke belch forth. Lead pellets and shards of iron scream toward the rebels at impossible speed. Horses rear in panic. Men fall, without arrows touching them. The smell of sulfur hangs heavy, like the breath of demons. For the first time in recorded history, a battlefield witnesses the roar of true guns, hand cannons blasting projectiles with the fury of captured lightning. And the fear it unleashes? It's not just from the wounds. It's from the realization that war has changed forever. The gods themselves seem to have armed one side. The world wasn't ready for this thunder from human hands. This is a story when guns first appeared. The weapon born in ancient China that no one saw coming, the one that would shatter empires, rewrite rules of battle, and spread a terror deeper than any sword or arrow ever could. Our tale begins not with war, but with a quest for eternal life. In the misty mountains and hidden laboratories of 9th century China, during the Tang dynasty, Taoist alchemists searched for the elixir of immortality. They mixed saltpeter from cave walls and manure piles, charcoal from burned wood, and sulfur from volcanic springs. One day, legend says around 850 A.D., the mixture ignited in a spectacular flash. Instead of immortality, they discovered fire medicine, what we call gunpowder. At first, it was a curiosity. Fireworks for festivals. Incendiary arrows to set enemy ships ablaze. But the Chinese were practical people, locked in endless wars against nomads from the north and rebels within. By the 10th century, under the Song dynasty, military engineers turned this divine fire into weapons of terrifying power. They started with a fire lance, a bamboo tube packed with gunpowder, tied to the spear. Light the fuse, and it spewed flames and sparks up to 10 feet, blinding and burning attackers. Soldiers described it as a spear that breathes fire like a dragon. In sieges, defenders rained these down from city walls, turning ladders into infernos. But the Song innovators didn't stop there. They experimented with bombs, iron casings filled with gunpowder, hurled by catapults to explode among enemy ranks. Thunder crash bombs that shatter morale as much as bodies. Poison smoke bombs that choke formations. By 1000 AD, Chinese armies had entire arsenals dedicated to huayao, fire drug, weapons. The real breakthrough came in the 12th and 13th centuries. Bamboo tubes couldn't contain the full force. Alchemists refined the formula, 75% saltpeter for maximum bang. Metal workers cast bronze barrels strong enough to hold the pressure without bursting. Enter the huachong, the fire tube, or a hand cannon. The earliest possible depiction is a sculpture from 1128 AD in the Dazhu rock carvings, a demon-like figure holding what looks suspiciously like a vase-shaped gun erupting flame. But the first undeniable artifacts and records appear under the Mongol Yuan dynasty. The oldest surviving true gun is the Heilongjiang hand cannon, dated to around 1288. It's bronze, about 13 inches long, weighing under 8 pounds, a thick tube widening at the muzzle like a trumpet, with a touch hole for the fuse. Inside, it held gunpowder and projectiles, lead balls, pottery shards, anything to shred flesh at range. And it saw battle almost immediately. In 1287 to 1288, Prince Nayan rebelled against Kublai Khan. The history of Yuan records that loyal forces under a Jurchen commander named Li Ting deployed hand cannon troops, Zhongzu, who carried these weapons on their backs into the fight. When the rebels charged, the cannons roared. The noise alone, described as thunder that shakes the heavens, panicked horses and men and ewes to such unnatural fury. We don't have detailed rebel accounts, but imagine the terror. One moment, traditional warfare. The next, invisible death hurled from smoke and flame. No archer visible. No arrow flight to dodge. Just sudden, deafening blasts and men dropping with holes torn through armor. The psychological shock was profound. Early gunpowder weapons weren't always more lethal than crossbows or composite bows. Range was short, reload slow, accuracy poor in rain. But the fear factor? Immense. The sulfur stench, the blinding flash, the earth-shaking boom. It felt supernatural. Enemies whispered of sorcery, of fire demons summoned by the Khan. This wasn't isolated. By the 1270s, Yuan forces used similar weapons in sieges against the Song. At the fall of Xiangyang in 1273, a turning point that doomed the Song, Mongol-employed Muslim engineers deployed massive counterweight trebuchets hurling gunpowder bombs. But hand cannons were there too, clearing walls with blasts of shrapnel. The world didn't expect this. Nomadic warriors who conquered with horse archery suddenly faced troops wielding thunder. Traditional knights and samurai would later feel the same dread when guns reached them. But China kept the secret for centuries. Why? Partly geography. Constant threats from mobile horse archers made heavy cannons less useful than fast cavalry. Partly culture. Confucian scholars valued tradition over innovation in some eras. The weapons improved slowly. Longer barrels, better powder, multiple shots from organ-like racks. Yet the fear spread with the technology. When Mongols carried prototypes west during invasions, Islamic engineers refined them. By the 14th century, hand cannons appeared in the Middle East and Europe. Crude, unreliable, but terrifying. Knights in full plate, trained from boyhood for lance and sword, suddenly faced peasants with tubes that punched through armor from afar. The social order trembled. The divine right of the armored elite, shattered by a blacksmith's invention. That's the fear the world didn't expect. Not just death from afar, but the democratization of killing. Any man with powder and tube could fell a noble. Warfare, once the domain of warriors bred for it, became industrial. From that smoky battlefield in 1288, a chain reaction began. Guns evolved, matchlocks, wheelix, flintlocks, rifles, machine guns, modern assault weapons. Billions of lives touched, empires risen and fallen, all tracing back to those Taoist alchemists seeking immortality and accidentally unleashing hell on earth. The thunder first cracked in China, and the world has been trying to catch up. The thunder that first cracked in the Manchurian plains in 1288 didn't stay confined to China. The Mongols, the greatest conquerors the world had ever seen, carried the secret west like a plague, and wherever it went, it brought the same primal fear, the unnatural roar of man-made lightning that killed from smoke and flame. By the early 1300s, Mongol armies invading India, Persia, and Eastern Europe deployed hand cannons alongside their traditional horse archers. Islamic chroniclers in the Delhi Sultanate described them as fire pots that spat death without arrows. In 1326, during a siege in India, the invaders used bronze tubes to blast offenders off walls. The noise alone, described as a sky tearing open, caused panic among troops who had faced elephants and scimitars without flinching. But the real explosion happened when the knowledge reached the Islamic world. Muslim engineers, already masters of siegecraft and mathematics, saw the potential immediately. In Mamluk Egypt and Syria, by the mid-14th century, gunsmiths refined the crude Chinese designs. They cast longer, stronger barrels, experimented with better powder mixtures, and mounted the weapons on wooden frames for stability. The earliest clear Western record comes from 1326. The famous Walter de Milmeat manuscript in England shows a vase-shaped gun firing an arrow-like projectile at a castle. But that's likely second-hand knowledge. The first actual use in the Islamic world is better documented. In 1342 to 1344, during the siege of Algeciras in Spain, Moroccan Marinid forces under Abu al-Hassan deployed midfa, cannons that fired iron balls with gunpowder. Spanish chroniclers wrote of tubes of bronze that vomited fire and iron, shattering shields and terrifying Christian knights. The fear was palpable. Men in full mail, trained to face lances and crossbows, suddenly confronted weapons that punched through armor at range with no visible projectile until impact. By the 1360s, hand cannons reached the Ottoman Turks. Young and aggressive, the Ottomans embraced the technology like no one else. They hired Chinese and Muslim experts, set up foundries, and scaled production. Their early guns, called tüfek, were short, heavy, and awkward, but the psychological edge was massive. At the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, Ottoman forces used hand cannons against Serbian knights. The heavy cavalry charge, once unstoppable, faltered under volleys of smoke and lead. Chroniclers noted horses rearing in terror at the noise, riders thrown before even reaching Ottoman lines. The Serbs fought bravely, but the new weapons contributed to a victory that cemented Ottoman power in the Balkans. Europe proper felt the shockwave in the early 1400s. The 100 Years' War between England and France became the proving ground. At first, guns were rare curiosities, unreliable in rain, slow to reload, more dangerous to the user than the enemy. But the fear was immediate. Imagine being a French knight at Agincourt in 1415, muddy field, longbow arrows raining down. Then from the English lines, strange tubes belch fire. Not many, but enough to kill a few men in spectacular fashion. The psychological blow. These peasants with iron pots can fell a noble from afar. The divine order battle, where training and bloodline mattered, crumbles. But the real terror came with larger guns. By the 1420s, European smiths cast true cannons, massive bronze or iron tubes hurling stone or iron balls hundreds of yards. At the Siege of Orleans in 1428 to 1429, English guns battered walls, but the French, inspired by Joan of Arc, charged anyway. The fear was there, but not yet decisive. The turning point was 1453, the fall of Constantinople. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, only 21 years old, brought the largest artillery train ever assembled. Hungarian engineer Orban cast a monster cannon called Basilica, 27 feet long, firing 600-pound stone balls. It took 60 oxen to move. When it fired, the sound carried miles. Walls that had stood 1,000 years against sieges cracked and crumbled after weeks of bombardment. Byzantine defenders, heirs to Roman glory, watched in horror as their impregnable Theodosian walls, triple layers, towers, moats, were reduced to rubble by devilish tubes. One chronicler wrote, "The very earth trembled, and men fell to their knees thinking the end of the world had come." When the city fell on May 29th, the news rocked Christendom. Constantinople, the second Rome, unconquered for centuries, destroyed by gunpowder. Kings and popes scrambled to copy the technology. Foundries sprang up across Italy, Germany, France. The fear spread faster than the weapons. Knights who once charged with lances now faced volleys that ignored plate armor. Castles, symbols of feudal power, became obsolete. A single cannon could do in days what a siege once took months. In Japan, when Portuguese traders brought matchlock arquebus in 1543, samurai laughed at first, clumsy, slow, dishonorable. Then at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, Oda Nobunaga deployed 3,000 gunners in rotating volleys behind wooden barricades. Takeda cavalry, Japan's finest, charged into a wall of smoke and lead. Hundreds fell before closing. The samurai code cracked. Guns became standard. The world didn't expect this fear, because guns attacked something deeper than bodies. They attacked hierarchy. A peasant with a hand cannon could kill a knight who'd trained his whole life. A merchant city with cannons could defy a king. Empires built on horse and bow, Mongol, Timurid, found their edges blunted. The terror wasn't just a wound. It was a noise, like gods angry. The smoke, hiding the shooter like sorcery. The randomness, no skill in aiming needed at first. Just point and pray. And the smell, sulfur, like hell itself had opened. From China to Constantinople, from Kosovo to Nagashino. The reaction was the same. This is not war as we know it. This is something demonic. The world adapted, of course. Armor thickened and vanished. Tactics changed. Fortresses became star-shaped bastions to deflect shot. Armies grew massive to absorb losses. But the fear never fully left. Every new generation facing guns for the first time, whether Zulu warriors against British rifles or trench soldiers hearing the first machine guns, felt that ancient dread reborn. The alchemists sought immortality. They gave us something far more enduring, a weapon that made every man equal in death. And the fear it brought? The fear that began with those first hand cannons in 1288 never truly faded. It evolved, growing with every leap in technology, haunting soldiers and civilians alike across centuries, right up to our own time. By the 16th century, guns had become reliable enough to dominate battlefields. The Spanish tercios, pikemen protecting ranks of arquebusiers, proved unstoppable in Italy and the Americas. At the Battle of Pavia in 1525, French knights, the flower of European chivalry, charged into volleys of lead. Hundreds fell before closing. King Francis I himself was captured, writing later, "All is lost save honor in my life." The age of the armored knight ended not with a bang, but with thousands of small ones. In the New World, the terror was even more profound. When Cortés faced the Aztecs in 1521, his few dozen harquebuses and cannons shattered morale more than bodies. Aztec warriors, armed with obsidian blades that could decapitate a horse, believed thunder and lightning belonged to gods like Tlaloc. Spanish guns, roaring, smoking, killing from afar, convinced many that these bearded strangers were divine or demonic. Chronicles describe Aztec ranks hesitating, warriors falling to their knees at the first volley, convinced the end of the world had come. The same pattern repeated everywhere guns arrived first. In Japan after Nagashino, traditionalists decried firearms as cowardly, but warlords like Tokugawa Ieyasu embraced them. By the 1600s, Japan produced more guns than all of Europe combined, until the shogun had banned them to preserve samurai dominance. In Africa, when Portuguese traders brought muskets to the Congo in the late 1500s, local kings saw them as magical thunder sticks. But the fear cut both ways. Soon, European slavers armed allies with guns, turning intertribal wars into capture raids that fed the Atlantic slave trade. Millions suffered because one side had the new terror weapon. The 17th and 18th centuries saw guns refined into muskets and flintlocks, smoother, faster, deadlier. Volley fire became standard. At Blenheim in 1704, Marlborough's disciplined ranks fired by platoon, never stopping. French soldiers described it as facing a wall of flame. The psychological toll, men marching into certain death, held by discipline and fear of officers behind them. But the real escalation came in the 19th century. Rifled barrels gave accuracy. Breech loading and cartridges gave speed. The mini-ball, conical, expanding, turned wounds horrific. At Gettysburg in 1863, Pickett's charge walked into Union rifles that could kill at 500 yards. Survivors spoke of the eerie whistle of bullets, the sudden gaps in ranks, the sense that death came invisibly from nowhere. Then came machine guns. The Gatling in the American Civil War was crude, but the Maxim gun in the 1880s changed everything. At Omdurman in 1898, British forces with 6 Maxims faced 50,000 Sudanese warriors. In 5 hours, 12,000 attackers died. British losses, 47. One officer wrote, "It was not a battle but a slaughter. The Maxim was the devil's paintbrush." Colonial empires expanded with terrifying ease. In Africa and Asia, a handful of Europeans with machine guns held off thousands. The fear wasn't just death, it was helplessness. Traditional courage meant nothing against sustained fire that mowed men like grass. World War I brought the culmination of that ancient terror. Trenches, barbed wire, and millions of rifles turned the Western Front into a meat grinder. The first day on the Somme, 57,000 British casualties, many in minutes crossing no man's land into German machine guns. Soldiers described the sound as a continuous roar, like tearing canvas. The smell, cordite blood, mud. The randomness, men beside you simply gone. Gas and tanks added new horrors, but the rifle and machine gun remained the constant killers. Veterans carried the fear home. Sudden noises triggering panic, dreams of endless volleys. World War II scaled it further. Submachine guns, assault rifles like the STG-44, gave individuals firepower, once reserved for crews. On Omaha Beach, German MG-42S, Hitler's buzzsaw, fired 1,200 rounds a minute. GI spoke of the sound like ripping cloth, pinning entire companies in the surf. But the fear evolved again with nuclear weapons. Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, One bomb, one plane, cities erased. The thunder from 1288 now ended civilizations. The Cold War lived under that shadow. Mutual assured destruction, the knowledge that humanity's oldest weapon had grown capable of ending itself. Today, the fear persists in new forms. Assault rifles in school shootings, drones striking without warning. The same sulfur smell in war zones from Ukraine to Gaza. Soldiers still describe a first time under fire. The crack overhead, the invisible death, the primal urge to hide. But there's another layer now, the cultural fear. Guns democratized killing, yes, but also resistance. Colonized peoples eventually got them too. American revolutionaries beat the greatest empire. Vietnamese peasants humbled superpowers. The fear cuts both ways. Those in power dread the day the thunder reaches the powerless. From that first roar in Manchuria, guns have reshaped society. Crime, self-defense, hunting, sport, all touched. Debates rage, control them, ban them, arm more. But the root fear remains, what the rebels felt in 1288 when bronze tubes belched fire. We invented a way to kill at distance, without looking our enemy in the eye, without needing strength, training, or even courage at first. We made death industrial, impersonal, scalable. The alchemists wanted immortality. They gave us a tool that makes every life more fragile. And the fear they unleashed, the sense that something fundamental changed when humans first harnessed thunder, is still with us. Every time a shot rings out, whether in war or peace, we hear an echo of that battlefield in 1288. The world adapted, but it never stopped being afraid, because guns didn't just change how we fight. They changed what it means to be human in a world where anyone can summon lightning. Thanks for coming on this journey through time. From Taoist labs to modern headlines, it's a story of an invention no one expected, and a fear we've never quite escaped. The thunder still rolls.